McCadden. This is my presentation on how to mitigate liabilities to both police agencies and officers. Before I go any further, just a quick little insight into my background. I am a Marine of 6 years, 4.5 of which were with the infantry. So some of the subjects on here, I'll be throwing in my own personal and professional experience and knowledge on, as well as a couple of articles and research that I've found on my own here. So without further ado, first subject here we have is training. All the Marines, I was had it drilled and bashed into my head that training is everything, and something that I've come to not only personally believe but acknowledge its effect. With all the bad press and publicity that our officers are receiving nowadays, especially in regards to police shootings, I believe that in many cases further training would have been beneficial for those officers as far as determining what the correct course of action would have been. On the particular topic of shootings, rather, we look at firearms training. And when I say firearms training, I'm not just simply stating, how best to hit that paper target. I'm speaking, how to best handle the weapon itself, because there are actually, I found a couple small reports here and there where it was an accidental or what we call negligent discharge of the weapon. And usually when a negligent discharge goes off, it's because someone's finger was around the trigger. And weapon safety rules, though the verbiage may vary from civilian to military and from military branch to military branch, the fundamental principles are the same. And one of those big safety rules is that you keep your finger straight and off the trigger until you're ready to fire, or rather intend to fire. And if those safety rules had been observed, there would have been a few less shootings involved, at least accidental discharges of those weapons, saving both the department and the public both time, money, and embarrassment. We can also look into training on non-lethal arms training. That's your maces, your mace sprays, that is, your nightsticks, and tasers or stun guns. I believe that further training in usage of those particular weapons or items could also benefit our police force in limiting how much negative press we get, because you get far less negative press when your officers are seen tasing a guy versus shooting a guy. It also, presents less risk of anyone else accidentally getting hurt, as well. With a firearm, when you're shooting, bullets tend to go through things. When you're using non-lethal methods, they usually stop on the first sign of impact on whatever they're hitting, a wall, person, a tree leaf, or anything like that. So far less risk to innocent bystanders who might just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Which kind of, all those two topics above kind of roll into appropriate force application. When is it best to use either type of force, or any force at all, really? There was a case of a black gentleman back in 2009, I believe, if I'm remembering my information correctly, who was stopped for peddling cigarettes, but he was placed into a chokehold. First off, the chokehold is a outlawed maneuver by police departments nowadays. Secondly, the gentleman was, although verbally non-compliant, he wasn't being physically non-compliant. He wasn't trying to run or anything like that. And the officers, for whatever reason, saw fit to step up their level of engagement and step up their force application. And I believe that had those officers been further trained, or more regularly trained, that situation probably would not have occurred. They probably would have found another way to have to detain or further detain that particular individual. The link I have down below is a Washington Post article on police shootings in general, which kind of opened my eyes a little bit as far as, some of the statistical analysis. It was more along the lines of, who is being shot and why they're being shot. If you were to believe everything that you see on TV or the internet, as far as, what's trending, you would think that officers are going around shooting anyone and everybody. According to this Washington Post article, that is actually not the case. There's actually a very small percentage, I believe it said 4%, of 4 or 9% of the shootings that have actually occurred in 2015 were unarmed. I think it was somewhere around the neighborhood of 90 fatal shootings occurred that were unarmed, and the rest were armed either by a firearm or some other form of weapon. So either way, I believe, the further training and usage of those weapons and when to use those weapons appropriately would be greatly beneficial to both agencies and the public that they serve. In doing so, which kind of rolls into next topic here. Who are the bad guys? Actually, I believe I was supposed to put that as who are the bad guys. And when we're trying to identify or answer the question of who the bad guys are, we're talking, how do officers determine who warrants their attention. Now, obviously, it's easier to, determine when somebody calls the police and says, help, help, I'm being robbed, or, somebody's starting a fist fight in my bar, can you please come and break it up? That's a little easier to determine that, hey, they're the bad guys, they're the ones causing the commotion, and we have eyewitnesses pointing that out. But when you're on patrol, this is what I'm really talking about here. It's like, how do you determine who's up to no good? One subject is profiling in this matter, as far as, when it's used. Now, constitutionally and legally, profiling is not enough. It's not actually even considered an appropriate method of determining right or wrong. However, from my own personal experience, while we were over in Iraq and everything, you always have a profile. You always have that standard, almost a cookie cutter idea of who the bad guy is. And so what we need to really do is teach officers, not necessarily to profile, but when profiling, because it's really something that just naturally happens. You're always going to profile somebody, you're always going to see that man in the business suit and say, oh, he must be rich and well off, when he could actually be in a small apartment barely making ends meet. The proper use of profiling would be more along the lines of, identifying that, hey, that businessman, that man in the business suit, might look all nice and proper, but he's looking over his shoulder a little too often, and he's constantly rubbing his hands together, or wiping them on his pants, and it's leaving a little bit of a residue on his nice pants there, and it's clearly sweat. The man is nervous. It's like, that tells me that he's up to no good, or he's expecting something bad to happen. Those types of profiling methods are good to have for when you're out on the street. However, you're only going to develop those those skills if you have experience on the road, and you're going to further develop those if you have somebody next to you who knows how to do that, or knows what the signs are for criminal activity, which brings us to the next bullet there: experience with inexperience. And what I'm talking about there is putting more of an emphasis on partner-based policing. Sticking that new deputy or officer with somebody who's been on the road for the last 5 years or more. Somebody who knows what they're doing. And I know that our departments nowadays, they actually do that, for the most part. However, the length and the extent is varied depending on what department you're looking at and what area you're going to and everything. So I think enforcing this more, either through extended time, maybe it's like, instead of for the first year, it'd be like the year and a half or 2 years you're with a partner who has 3 years on you, maybe, or maybe making it more frequent. Instead of just simply saying, this is your sergeant, you report to them. Every once in a while you mentor and go on a patrol with them. It's more, this is your partner for the next year. For the next 365 days, you two will know each other and, work with each other. Something along those lines, where the new guy learns firsthand from personal experience. He's not reading it out of a book. He's not going through another safety or some sort of brief on a PowerPoint, much like what you're watching right now.